Good evening, everyone. If you have a Bible with you, go ahead and grab that right now and go to Philippians chapter 1. It's Philippians chapter 1. If you didn't get to join us last week, we began and kicked off a series on Philippians 1, and we'll be continuing that this evening. But before we jump into the text, just want to take a moment once again to say thank you to those of you who are generously giving to the work of this church during this season. I want to thank you for your generosity, whether you've been giving for a long time, or perhaps you took up the challenge to just start giving a small amount during this time so that your heart can be knitted to what God is doing here at this church. I want to say thank you. I want to encourage those of you who haven't to jump in with us and to experience the joy that comes from giving to the work of the Lord. You can do that online. You can jump on and find all the information. Real simple to give online there. Invite you to do that. And so as we turn our attention now toward Philippians chapter 1, I want you to remember kind of what Philippians is all about and what Philippians has been known for, and maybe some of the context. As we think about Philippians, we're really thinking about these two things that seem to be opposites, that seem to kind of meet each other in the book of Philippians. The first is that everything we understand about the book of Philippians is that Philippians is written from jail. And maybe the more specific way to put it is that Paul, the one writing Philippians, the letter to the church at Philippi, is writing from jail, or we could really say in this context, house arrest. And so the first thing to see is that Philippians is written from a person who is confined to a home and not allowed to leave. It is written by a person who feels trapped and stuck and totally confined to one space. And at the same time, anyone who's been a Christian for a while would tell you that Philippians is typically known as being a book all about joy. It's an encouraging book. It's a blessing to read Philippians. You read Philippians and you're so uplifted and moved in your spirit. And so the two things I want to try to point out tonight that are fascinating is that Philippians is written from house arrest, and at the same time, it's this deeply encouraging book. And those seem to be two things that would be opposite, right? Like you wouldn't expect the person who's been stuck in their home, not allowed to leave freely, not allowed to do what they want, to write such an encouraging book. And yet that's exactly what we have in the book of Philippians. And I think this is something to linger on each and every week as we think about what it means to have encouragement from house arrest. What it means to have encouragement from an individual who is stuck and not allowed to move freely and do what they wish to do. And the way I want us thinking about it tonight is we're going to start in verse 12, and what we're going to see is Paul's going to start to talk about his own experience in house arrest. But it's actually one of the interesting parts of this story that Paul takes that long to get to his own experience. Like, let me put it to you a different way. In the first 11 verses of the book of Philippians, Paul doesn't talk about himself and his own trials one time. Like, Paul spends the first 11 verses of the book not talking about himself, but rather talking about something else. Let me put it to you this way. I want you to imagine we're in the ancient world, and the church in Philippi gets a letter. And they pull this letter out of their mailbox in Philippi, and they open it up, and they open the letter, and they go, guys, we got a letter from Paul. And everyone's like, Paul? Wasn't he thrown in prison? Like, tell us, what's he telling us about himself? Paul, the one who was in prison? And he's like, yeah, I got the letter. Everyone, listen up. Paul's gonna tell us all about what it's like in prison. And they open the letter and they get to verse 1. It's Paul and Timothy, servants of Jesus Christ. It's really him, guys. It's really Paul, the one who was under house arrest. And they begin to read, expecting Paul to talk about what it's like to be in prison, expecting Paul to tell the sad story of how he ended up under house arrest. And they begin reading, and in verse 3, he says, well, I thank God every time I remember you. Like, okay, that's curious. And my prayers for all of you. Goes on that as I'm praying with joy, and it's right for me to feel this way about you. And then I have you in my heart. They must be reading on, going, seriously, Paul, enough about us. Like, they could start talking about your house arrest. He goes on in verse 9, he says that your love may abound. In verse 10, that you may be able to discern. Like, it's actually a fascinating thing, isn't it? That the people in Philippi, the church in Philippi, receives this letter from Paul. And I got to imagine they're expecting Paul to start talking about himself, and it takes 12 verses for him to even reference himself. You want to know why I think this book is so encouraging? At least one of the reasons I think Philippians is so encouraging is this, and I've observed this through my own life, perhaps you've seen it as well, that the most encouraging people in your life aren't usually talking about themselves, right? Like the people who encourage you most in this life aren't usually talking about themselves. They're usually talking about you. The people who really bless you and encourage you and move you along in your faith and in your life aren't usually going on and on and on about themselves. They're talking about you. They're asking you questions. They're telling you things. They're affirming you and building into you. And here's why I think this is so significant for us right now. I think this is so significant for us right now because the temptation in a season like this is to know your own story and know your own struggles and know your own hardships and to share that with everyone who asks and to share that with anyone who would dare to listen to you. So you catch up with a friend on the phone or you're on Zoom kind of catching up with some friends you haven't spoken to in a while. And the temptation is to talk about how this has been hard on you and to talk about how difficult this season's been and why it's especially hard for you and especially hard for what you're going through. The temptation is to talk about you. But here's what we learned from Paul's letter. And here's perhaps what you've learned in your own life. That the most encouraging people in your life aren't talking about themselves all the time. And if you want to be an encouragement in this season, just like Paul is an encouragement, open your conversations like Paul does. Not talking about you and obsessing about you and throwing a pity party for you and talking about how hard it is for you, but rather turning your attention toward the other person, looking at them, asking them questions, praying for them, encouraging them. That's what Paul models for us. Because the most encouraging people in your life and in my life aren't usually talking about themselves. They're usually, those people who are encouraging to me are talking about me. They're building into me. They're being selfless, just like Paul was here. I want you to see how it opens up in verse 12, because 11 verses in again, he still hasn't shared anything about his own story, and he's finally gonna do that. But in verse 12, he says this. He says, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, what's happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it's become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the other brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare to proclaim the gospel without fear. Like this is this amazing thing. But Paul is preaching the gospel and he's going around starting churches and proclaiming that Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. He's the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of the living God. He's proclaiming this all throughout the world. And then he gets arrested. Like he's going, doing these good things, proclaiming the gospel, starting churches, leading people to the Lord, and he gets arrested and stopped in his tracks. And he gets put in prison, and he gets put under house arrest, and he gets put with these guards who are with him. And I don't know about you, but if I were in that circumstance, I think I would see what happened to me as an obstacle. Like as this obstacle in the way of getting done what I want to get done. And so my thinking would be if I could just get out of house arrest, then I'd be able to do all the things I'm supposed to do. If I could just get out of this home confinement that I've been put in, then I would be able to go. Like if the government would just release me to go do the thing I want to do, then everything will be fine. But here's what Paul does. Paul doesn't see this as an obstacle. Paul sees this as an opportunity. Like Paul's looking at these guards, and here's what Paul realizes. Paul realizes that confinement is an opportunity for influence. It's an opportunity for influence. Like imagine Paul's thinking. Paul's going, here are these Roman guards. There's never going to be another moment where the Roman guards are gonna hear the gospel from Paul. Paul goes, this is my moment. He goes, who else is gonna tell these Roman guards, these soldiers about Jesus, if not me? This is my moment. This is my opportunity. Yes, there's confinement, but confinement comes with it opportunity for influence. Let me speak to you right now as you're continuing to be in confinement. This is one of those times I've been talking to so many people where at first it was kind of interesting, and then it was kind of like, okay, how long is this gonna last? And then it was kind of like, all right, maybe this is okay. But some people hit a wall this last week. We passed the 1 month mark and it just felt overwhelming. But here's what Paul recognized. And here's what I wonder if you've recognized already in your own spirit, that your confinement is an opportunity for influence. You see, here's what I think happened to some of you. Let me speak to you if you're in college. Some of you were off at college and you had your whole spring semester, your winter quarter going, and everything seemed good at college. And then your college shut down and you had to come back. And for some of you, you've been so frustrated at your home because you wish you were on campus at your college, and you don't even realize that you've been confined with people you have the opportunity to influence. Like some of you in college don't realize that you have a younger brother or sister in middle school or in high school, and you can influence him or her. Like some of you haven't even really put it together that you've been confined with your parents, and some of your parents aren't believers, and this is an opportunity for influence. Like some of you with your roommates, you live together, but you've never actually spent time together this much because you're always going in other directions. And this is an opportunity for influence. I know some of you listening to me are parents, and you're at home right now, and maybe even your kids are driving you crazy. But I want you to remember that you might have more opportunities for influence now than you ever will in the rest of their lives. See, confinement is an opportunity for influence. This is what Paul understood. Paul wasn't just trying to get out of it and move past it and just blow by the moment. Paul understood that this might be the only opportunity to influence these guards for Christ, so he takes the moment. And I wonder if we're taking the moment. And I wonder if we're taking the moment seriously. Because the truth is, you are going to influence the people around you. The only question is, what kind of influence will you have? If right now you are filled with negativity and cynicism, which I've said this in YA before, negativity and cynicism are not fruit of the Spirit, right? Like if you're just the person who's just always mad and always bitter and always angry and always cranky with the world, that is not fruit of the Spirit. That can rub off on people. That can influence the people in your home right now. Maybe you're filled with gossip. Maybe you're filled with slander and you're just kind of talking about other people right now. That's what you're using your opportunity, and that's how you're influencing people. Like, I want you to know you're going to influence the people who are around you. And so if you're going to influence them, why not influence them with faith, with hope, with love, and with courage? Why not speak words of kindness and generosity and compassion to the people you get to influence in this season? Your little brother, your mom, your roommate who you never actually get to hang out with, your son who's had some trouble in the last year. Use this opportunity, just like Paul did, for influence of the people around you. It goes on this way in verse 15. It says, it's true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether by false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. So here's what I want to point out to you. Paul is talking here about some individuals, and whatever these individuals are preaching on, it's not exactly clear what exactly is going on and what exactly this preacher or these preachers are doing. But here's what is clear to Paul. It's stirring up trouble for him. Like what we see here is Paul in Philippians, this super encouraging, joyful, positive book, is actually pointing out some problems that are going on in the church. And I think this is actually a significant moment for us to stop and think about the fact that back in Paul's day, when he was proclaiming Christ and the church was being born, back in the days of the early church, I want to observe that there were problems. There were people stirring up trouble. And I need you to know this is not unique to the book of Philippians. And in fact, Philippians might actually be one of the most positive. In the book of Galatians, there are people who have been bewitched and are preaching a different gospel. In the book of 1 Corinthians, there are individuals Paul is calling out for egregious sexual sin within the church. There's division, there's hatred, there's jealousy, there's all of these things that the earliest church is being rebuked for. And I think this is actually a significant thing, again, for us to stop on. Because right now, there's this thing going on in my own heart, and perhaps you've experienced it too, where you're kind of longing for the days before. Like there was a time back then when it seemed simpler. There was a time back then when things seemed easier. And maybe that was just a couple months ago before all of this started. You're just kind of longing to go back to that time. But actually, if you've been around church long enough, one of the things you'll start to hear is actually the language that we should go back to a different time, when church used to be good, when they used to preach the word, when it used to be all about this, when it used to be this. See, there's this idea in our mind that the church once was great, but what we have to do is get back to where the church was. Sometimes people will even say things, and I think they're well-meaning. We have to be like the church in Acts. We have to be like the early church. And I appreciate what they're trying to say, because we see the power of God and the power of the resurrection and the boldness of their proclamation. But the reminder I'm always trying to make is, even here in Philippians, in this early church, there's people stirring up trouble. There's problems in the book of Acts. There's problems in the early church. And here's what this might be, just a stop for us to do, something for us to consider. It might be a moment for us to remind ourselves that we need to stop longing for the good old days of the church. We need to stop longing for the good old days. These imaginary days back in the day when everything was perfect and there were no problems. The imaginary days when everyone was on the same page and there were no issues in the church. I need you to know the early church was filled with problems. And I need you to know the time of the Reformation was filled with problems. And the time of the Great Awakening was filled with problems. And the 1950s and the 1980s and the 1990s and the early thousands and the tens or whatever else we're gonna call a decade ago were filled with problems. You don't actually have to study church history long to realize there are no good old days of the church. There are just these days. Like, my desire isn't that we would go back to the good old days of the church. It's that we would be faithful to Jesus now. It's that we would stand upon his word now. It's that we would proclaim the gospel boldly now. It's that we would be the church that Jesus has called us to be in this generation and in this season and in this time and in this world. That's what Jesus asks of us. Not that we would go back and be the church in the good old days, but that we would be faithful to the Lord Jesus Christ right now. In 2020, in this season, in this disruption, not looking back with rose-colored glasses on the old church, but being the church that Jesus has called us to be today. That's what I'm reminded of here. It goes on this way. In the back half of verse 18, Paul says, "And yes, and I will continue to rejoice. For I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that in no way I will be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death." And then in verse 21, he says these words, "For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain." From time to time, I try to point towards scriptures that I think really every Christian should memorize. And this is maybe one of those scriptures, and perhaps one of the easier ones. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. Like, this has been the banner that Christians have marched under for centuries, for millennia, to say that Christ is worth it to me. And if I'm alive in this world, I'll know Christ. But if I die, if this takes my life, if I don't end up making it, it will be gain for me because I will see him face to face. I will be in unbroken, perfect, holy communion with him for all of eternity. See, Paul's words here reveal this deep, Jesus-centered faith that he has. It reveals that Jesus is at the center of it. Because if he's alive, it's gonna be about Jesus. And if he dies, it's gain. And it's gain because he gets to see Jesus. This is the great faith that Paul is proclaiming here. It is the great faith that Christians have held on to for centuries. To live is Christ, to die is gain. And here's the question I want each of you listening to ponder tonight. As you sit in your living room, as you take notes, as you're thinking about this, as you're processing Philippians 1, here's the question I want you to consider tonight. It's real simple. Is your faith Jesus-centered or you-centered? This is the question. Is your faith Jesus-centered, like Paul, live as Christ, die as Cain, it's all about Jesus? Or have you created a faith? Are you following a version of Christianity that's you-centered? And you might say, no, Brian, if you're a Christian, it's definitely Jesus-centered. But here's what I've observed. Good people who call themselves Christians can very quickly slip into a you-centered version of Christian faith. Let me ask you a few questions for you to diagnose this. Because again, I think if I asked you this question, you'd go, option A, I'm going with A. No one's gonna be like, I'm me-centered. I know it's supposed to be Jesus, but I'm into me. No one's saying that. No one's going to actually articulate that they're you-centered and not Jesus-centered. But here's some questions to probe your heart a little bit. Number one, do you seek to live and love like Jesus? Well, that's sort of the language we use around here at this church, but is that what you're seeking to do? Or are you actually just seeking to live however you want to live and then trying to find things in the Bible that justify that? Are you actually seeking to live differently than everyone else, or are you just kind of interested in being accepted by everyone else in this world? Because if you're seeking to live and love like Jesus, you're forsaking your own life. You're saying it's not worth it for me just to live the way I want to live and do me. Listen, as a Christian, the mantra, just do what makes you happy, doesn't fit with this. Because to live and love like Jesus isn't just to do everything you already want to do. It's to live differently. Do you seek to live and love like Jesus? Question number two, Do you trust that you're still saved after you sin? Well, like after you sin, after you do the thing you promised you'd never do again, after you step into that sin that you've done over and over again in your guilt and in your shame. Because listen, if after every time you sin, you go, well, I must have lost my salvation, you've actually come to the belief, even if you don't say you have, you've come to the belief that your salvation's based on you. Like if every time you sin, you think you lose your salvation, then what you're saying is your salvation's based on you and not on Jesus. To be Jesus-centered in your faith is to say, yes, I've sinned, but my salvation was never dependent on my perfection. It was always dependent on my perfect Savior. That's what it means to be saved, to be Jesus-centered. Next question, are you willing to do something, anything, solely because Jesus said so? Like here's one of the things I'll observe. All throughout the Bible, there are these commands to do things. And what we are called to do as followers of Jesus, like if you're gonna call Jesus Lord, it means he's master, he's in charge, he's king. Whatever he says goes. And the temptation for you and for me is to see the commands of Jesus and to only obey, to only say yes if we agree with them already. And so Jesus says to forgive people, and you go, I don't know about that. And so you look for some books to read on forgiveness, and then you read a psychological study that says forgiveness is freeing for the heart, and you go, okay, I guess if all that data's there, then I'll obey Jesus. But that's not a Jesus-centered faith. Like if you only obey Jesus when you already agree with Jesus, it's a you-centered faith, not a Jesus-centered faith. Like, do you know Jesus also says to love your enemies, to pray for people who persecute you and hate you? Like there's no good evidence around. It's not like, oh yes, that's everyone thinks that way. No, I do that because Jesus said so. I pray for people I don't like, not because I think that's the natural thing to do, but because Jesus said so. Like do you do that just because Jesus said so? Next question, is turning to Jesus your first response or your last resort? Here's my fear for so many people who call themselves Christians. It's like something goes wrong in their life, and what they do is they just start running after everything they can do to solve something. And so they reach for their bank account, or they reach for a good friend, or they reach for some other resource. And it's not that those are bad things. It's just that sometimes we turn Jesus into our last resort. Like if everything else fails, I'll turn to Jesus, rather than our first response. Like if prayer isn't our first response, if crying out to Jesus when we're in trouble isn't our first response, it just reveals stuff in our heart. And what it reveals in our heart is that we're really centered around us and not around Jesus. And then final question I want to ask you, this question, do you long to be with Christ in heaven? Now, again, this is an important question to see how I phrased it. I didn't ask, do you long to be in heaven? Again, I've just never asked the question who wants to be in heaven? And everyone's like, I don't know about heaven. Maybe I don't want heaven. Like everyone wants heaven. Everyone wants heaven. Everyone wants a good ending. Everyone wants all the good things promised about heaven. But that's not actually the question here. The question is, do you long to be with Christ in heaven? Like in other words, the way I could put it is if you could have heaven with all of the promises of heaven, no more tears and a resurrected body and reunited with all the people who love Jesus throughout all time, all the good blessings of heaven, if you could have that, but Jesus wasn't gonna be there, do you wanna go there? And the answer to that question will tell you what you need to know about whether your faith is about you or it's really about Jesus. Because what heaven is ultimately about is communion with Christ. That's what Paul understood. Paul didn't say, for me to live as Christ, and then when I die, I guess it'll be better because I won't have to suffer anymore. No. For Paul, it was if I live, I have Jesus, and if I die, I get to know him better. That's what it means to have a Jesus-centered faith. These questions should be a diagnostic for your heart tonight. If your faith is centered around you, or if your faith is centered around Jesus, the same Jesus that Paul says, to live, it's Christ, and to die is gain. Here's how it goes on in verse 22. It says, if I'm to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I don't know. I'm torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. But if it's more necessary for me to remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain, and I will continue with all of you in your progress and joy of faith, so that through my being with you and boasting in Jesus Christ will abound on account of me. Verse 27, whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Now, did you notice kind of the rhythm Paul was in here? Paul was kind of going down this road of, he's like, listen, I could die and be with Jesus. I could live and be here. And dying and being with Jesus, I mean, that would be like a total gain for me because I get to be with him face to face. But you know what? He's not done with me yet. And it's this great reminder, like if you still have breath in your lungs tonight, Jesus isn't done with you yet. Like if you're still here and you're still on this earth, if you're still on this planet, God's got work for you. He's not finished with you. You're not washed up. Your story's not over. Like it's this great reminder. But then ultimately he goes, whatever happens, live or die, he makes this incredible statement. He says, whatever happens, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. This is Paul's direction. This is Paul's vision. Like this is Paul's North Star. It's where he's going. It's where he's aiming. It's the direction he's walking in. And I was thinking about this, how significant this sentence might be for you tonight. Because I think for some of you, there's like a lot of different things in mind of like how you're gonna live your life and what your future is gonna look like and who you're gonna marry and what kids you're gonna have and what career you're gonna have or what you're gonna do in the next 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. There's so many questions. And here's what Paul has. Paul doesn't have an answer to every single decision you will make in the course of your life. I actually want you to know the Bible doesn't give you specific direction on every decision you will make today. Like what time should you go to bed and what should you eat for dinner and what clothes should you put on in the morning. The Bible doesn't have direction on every single little thing in our life. It's not a list of rules, but it does give us a vision for the type of life, a direction you can go in. Whatever happens, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Like I'll put it to you this way. I want you to remember a thing that maybe you're old enough to remember us doing this. There's a thing we used to do called leaving our houses. Do you remember that? Like we get in the car and drive places and we'd hang out with friends and it was awesome. And so I want you to imagine this weekend where it's like a bazillion degrees outside. And I want you to imagine that all of this is past or maybe none of this is happening. And I want you to imagine it's 1,000,000 degrees. So all of you and your friends decide you're gonna go down to the beach. Maybe it would look like this. Right? And this is a picture of one of our high school ministry bonfires a couple summers ago that I snapped, and it was just like, yeah, this is the image, right? So I want you to imagine you're heading toward the beach, and you're on the beach, and then a friend calls you from here, from home, and says, hey, I'm heading over to where you are. Where are you right now? And your answer is, we're at the beach in Malibu. And he's like, how do I get there? How do I get to you where you are right now? And your answer is, you go to the ocean. Go west. And some of you are like, actually, it's southwest. And I'm like, stop ruining my analogy here. Like, go west. Go west. Go toward the ocean. Just keep driving until you go to the ocean. Here's what they've laid out for you. They've laid a direction for you, like an aim for you. We all know this. There's a lot of ways to get to this beach, right? You can go up and over the grade through Oxnard. You can go through Decker Canyon and like get like car sick along the way. You can go through Canaan and just have like a nice easy drive. You can go through Malibu Canyon. There's all these different ways to get here, all these different paths, but it's the same aim. This is the aim. This is the vision. This is the direction. And here's what Paul's doing. Paul is not trying to answer every granular question that you have. He's not trying to solve every decision you have to make in your life. What Paul is trying to do is give you a direction. Go west, go to the ocean, head to Malibu. If you get in your car and drive east, if you get on the 118 and start driving through Simi Valley, you're going the wrong way. Like you're not going to make it here. And this is what Paul's doing. He's giving an aim and he's giving a direction that you would live a life worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like let's get real practical on this. I want us to imagine all the circumstances and situations you might be walking through right now. And there's so many of them, I can't even begin to describe them all, but let me try to describe a few. What if you're asking this question? Some of you are asking this question. What do I do if I lose my job? Like if I lose my job right now, maybe you've already lost your job. What do? What am I supposed to do? What's the Bible's answer to me? And here's the Bible's answer. You conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. This doesn't answer every question. This doesn't get to every issue that could possibly happen, but it gives you a direction. It gives you a vision. What do you do if you lose your job? Whatever you do, whatever else happens, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. What do I do if I get sick? What do I do if I end up in the hospital? What do I do if my body is failing me? You conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. That's what you do. whatever it looks like, whatever other decisions you make. Well, what do I do if the economy is super slow to recover? Like, what if the economy doesn't like boom back like everyone hopes it will, and it takes a few years for my career to get back on track? You conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Like, what if, like some of you are asking this, what if he breaks up with me? Like, what if he doesn't want to be together with me? What if we don't actually end up getting married? What if she dumps me? What if that happens? You conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. What if quarantine keeps going into the summer? And we all kind of think like May, okay, it's gonna be done definitely in May, but like what if it happens and it keeps going? We conduct ourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Like what if my depression gets worse? What if depression gets worse during this? What if things actually start to feel just too heavy for me? What do I do? And the Bible isn't gonna give you an answer to every little thing, but it's gonna give you a vision. And it's gonna say, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. College students, what do I do if my college doesn't even open in the fall? If they just boot the whole fall semester, here's what you do. You conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. This is the answer to your question. There's so many unknowns and there's so many things, and yet Paul gives a vision, a direction, an aim, a purpose for your life, that you would conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And here's what you need to know tonight, that the only conduct worthy of the gospel of Christ is living and loving like Jesus. It's living and loving like your Lord Jesus. It's saying yes to him. It's examining the Bible to see how Jesus lives and living in that way by the power of the Holy Spirit. What do you do in any situation that could be thrown at you in the next couple weeks or next couple months? You conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And the way you do that is by living and loving like Jesus. Here's how I want to close. This is the final text we'll look at tonight as we wrap up the first chapter of Philippians. He says, then whether I come to see you or only hear about you in my absence, then I'll know that you stand firm in the one Spirit, striving together for the one faith of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. And this is a sign to them that they will be destroyed and that you will be saved, and that you'll be saved, and that by God. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. For you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. So here's how the first chapter of Philippians rounds out. Paul is gonna return to his own struggle, and he's going to identify that this is a real issue for him. He's like, I might come see you, or I might only hear about you in my absence. Like, in other words, this whole like confinement, quarantine, house arrest thing, it might go on for longer than I'd like, but it's also possible I see you. Like, I wonder if you know exactly what that's like. Like, you're like, I might go to a wedding in a month, or I might be at home. I might go back to work, or I might be working at home for a long time. Our church might get to gather, but we might not. Like, this is what Paul's going through here. And he begins to talk about his suffering, and he goes, listen, you still hear? You hear that I still have this. Like, he's talking about him being stuck. But here's one of the things I love about Paul. But Paul's got this, like, you know what? To live is Christ and to die is gain. I want to preach the gospel, and if it's 2 guards in jail, then so be it. He goes, I might come see you, or I might be stuck here and only have to hear about what happens. See, Paul is demonstrating for us something here that I have taught to so many high school kids over the years. And this is a phrase, if you happen to be listening in high school ministry, or you were in our high school ministry, you'll remember hearing me talk about this, especially on our mission trips. We have this phrase, and the phrase is only 2 words. And it's a phrase that we use over and over and over again. And here's the phrase. The phrase is open hands. Open hands. But like, here's what we try to say. On a mission trip, what we want you to do is hold your hands wide open. We want you to be the type of person who goes into a mission trip when you're with a high school group and you're going on a mission trip to Uganda or Ukraine or Dominican Republic or Mexico or all the places we go with your hands wide open. And what that means is you don't wrap your hand around the details of the trip. You instead just keep your hands open, believing that whatever God has for us today is what God has for us today. And so we always tell them that dinner might be at 5 o'clock or it might be at 10 o'clock. Our flight might leave on time or it might leave 6 hours delayed. We might do the VBS tomorrow, or we might do it 2 days from now, or we might not do it at all. And the happiest people, the most fulfilled and effective people on mission trips are the people who keep their hands wide open rather than clinging their hands around what they think should happen. And here is what I'm convinced of. I'm convinced for every single one of us, we need to learn from the Apostle Paul. We need to learn from his teaching and learn from his life right now what it means to have open hands. Here's what happened to me in this last week. I've been looking forward to a number of things, good things in my own life. Trips I get to do and weddings I get to officiate. And I've been invited to speak at camps this summer for youth all over the state. And that's just this amazing and cool thing. And yet what's begun to happen is I began to get some phone calls that's not gonna happen. The wedding's getting delayed. The camp's been canceled. I don't get to go do those things. And I'm frustrated because like the Apostle Paul, I was doing good things. It's not like I was going out doing criminal activity and that got canceled. And I'm like, oh, come on, God. That's not what happened. I was trying to do good, gospel, life-giving things, and it got canceled. And I was frustrated, and I was angry, and I was bitter about this, and I was so twisted up this week, going, come on, God. Why won't you let me do the things I want to do for the sake of the gospel? Just feeling frustrated. But then I was reminded of this teaching. This teaching I try to push so hard on mission trips that's applicable right now too, that I would keep my hands wide open. That I wouldn't say I have to do this wedding, I have to go on this trip, I have to preach at this camp. I don't have to do these things in order for God to do great things in my life. I just need to keep my hands wide open. Let me put it to you this way, just so you understand the metaphor of the hands. I got this rope here, and I want you to imagine this. I'm actually going to invite Pastor Brian Williams, our young adult pastor, up here, and he's gonna say on this side of the stage, nice and socially distanced, and here's what I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine I'm holding this rope, and I want you to imagine right now, you can see it actually, that I'm holding it with open hands. But there's also a way of holding a rope like this where you wrap your hands around it. And here's the problem with wrapping your hands around a rope like this. What happens is sometimes you're holding the rope just like this, and then things change. And things change, and here's what quickly happens. You're thrown off balance, right? Like if you're holding on tightly, you're thrown off balance, and suddenly you don't have your equilibrium. And what happens too is if things change, the rope gets pulled through your hands, and suddenly your hands are burned, and you're in pain. See, when you wrap your hand around the rope, when you wrap your hand so tight, it actually causes pain. But then there's another way, where you're still holding onto the rope, where you're still holding on to things, but you do so with an open hand, and things change. And it's frustrating. It's annoying. It's not what you wanted, but it doesn't throw you off balance. It doesn't cause you pain. Like for some of you, this is the metaphor you need to work on right now. Because listen, you're gonna go into this summer, and some of you have the understanding that like in May, things are gonna change and things are gonna get better and things are gonna be all better, and you have this whole plan of what's gonna happen, and you have wrapped your hand around the idea of you understand how this disease and this quarantine and the economy is gonna work, and then things change. And suddenly you're thrown off balance again. Suddenly you're in pain. Like some of you have plans for the summer, and you're like, well, surely by summer, it's so hot already, it's gonna burn off and everything's gonna be better, and it's gonna be summer, and I'm going to finally get to go on that trip that I've delayed, or have that wedding we've been planning, or do that thing we've been planning, or come back to church. It's all gonna be good, and then things change. And you burn your hands. Because this fall, you're gonna go back to school and you've already got it planned. You're already planning like the greatest reunion with your friends in your dorm or your apartment because you're gonna get to go back to school, and so you have it planned, but then things change. And if you've got your hands wide open, all you have to do at that moment is let it run through. It's not that you never have plans. It's not that you never have anything in mind. It's just that you live in such a way that you're not holding on so tightly that every time things change, you get thrown off balance. That's the invitation that Paul gives us, and that's what it means to follow Jesus, to hold our plans loosely, to hold plans, to still have plans, to still think through your future. I'm not calling you to never think about your future or what next week or next year or next decade is gonna look like. It's just that you would hold it loosely, because sometimes things change, and things get pulled right out of your hands, and you don't even have the opportunity to see it happen before it does. And to the person who would open their hands wide open, just like Paul does, who says, whatever happens to me, I'm gonna live this way. Whatever happens, whether I see you or I don't, it's gonna be okay. That's the type of person who lives in the joy and encouragement of following Jesus. Here's how I wanna wrap up. I think some of you have plans already. plans for what the summer is going to look like, or plans for what May is going to look like, or plans for this fall, or plans for Christmas or the new year. You know how this is all going to go, and you have it all in your mind. And here's what I want to tell some of you. I think some of you have your hand wrapped tightly around a plan. And I think that plan is going to get ripped out of your hands if you're not careful. And it is going to throw you off balance. It is going to burn you. It is going to hurt you. It's going to bring pain into your life. And for some of you tonight, whether you're a young adult or you're just tuning in or you're just new to us, wherever you're at, I think some of you tonight need to open your hands wide open because you don't know what's gonna happen next. You don't know how this is gonna go. You don't know how this turns out. And rather than clinging on to what you think you can control, the invitation tonight is to open your hands. And so here's what I want you to do. Right in your living room, your bedroom, your kitchen, wherever you're watching from right now, I'm gonna pray, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to open your hands right out in front of you. If you're sitting on the couch, put them right on your knees, on top of your knees. If you're standing right now, just hold them right out in front of you. If you're sitting at the table, just put your hands right on the table. Open your hands up right now. And I'm gonna pray. And I wanna pray for you, and while I pray, I want your hands to be wide open. I want you to go, God, whatever you want to do with this next month, this next summer, this next year, this next season of life, I'm in. And if my plans change, I'm okay with it because I'm holding them loosely. And if things don't go the way I want them to go, I'm okay with it, God, because I trust that you're in control. And I trust that you know what you're doing. I trust that you are the God who knows and holds all things. And then finally, I want to invite you tonight to ask God to put whatever he wants into your hands, whatever he wants for your future, whatever he wants for your life, that he would put that into your hands and that you would stop holding on to what you think you control. So with our hands open, let's pray. Father in heaven, I thank you for tonight. I thank you for your word. I thank you that you're the God who meets us here. God, I pray for the young woman who's listening right now who has a plan and knows what they want to happen and knows how they want it to happen. I pray, God, she would open her hands, open her heart tonight. I pray for the young man who's so stuck on an idea, so stuck on a future that he's decided for himself. God, would you open his hands tonight? God, would we be a people who live constantly with the idea that if things work out, great, but if not, you're still in control. God, help us to trust you. Help us to love you. Open our hands wide open, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, listen, we're gonna sing one final song as we close out tonight, and we invite you to sing with us. But perhaps for some of you who have been praying and thinking about this open hand concept, you need to continue to have your hands wide open right now. I invite you as you sing, or at least listen to this final song, that wherever you're at, your hands would remain open as a prayer to God that he would do exactly what he wants to do in your life, and that you would have the faith to receive that. Let's worship.